Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming along today to find out more about how work design can support you and your organisation in your efforts to prevent and manage psychosocial risks. My name is Lynn Gunning, and I'm the Director of the Strategic Programs team within Strategic Partnerships and Engagement Group at Comcare. My role today is to facilitate delivery of this webinar together with my colleague, Tamara Wakeman. Tamara is a work health and safety professional with almost 25 years experience working first in the private sector and then in the APS. She spent the last 4 years leading Comcare's Good Work Design program of work and has a passion for translating research evidence into practical actions that people can take in workplaces to make work better. So Bomin Jenka, welcome. On behalf of Comcare, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which we are virtually meeting today. I'm joining you from Melbourne, so I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri, the Woiwurrung and the Boonwurrung peoples of the Eastern Kulin Nation. I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and extend that respect to all the other First Nations people who are present today and all the various lands on which we're joining across Australia. Today's webinar is an opportunity for our team to share what we understand about what works at an operational level in workplaces to effectively build wellbeing and protect people from psychosocial risks. Put simply, work design is a practical approach that people at all levels can use to improve the quality of their work, to make sure their work is good for them and meets their needs as individuals. Today, we're going to introduce you to Curtin University's Smart Work Design model that provides an evidence-based framework that managers and workers can use to make changes to work design for individuals, teams, and organisations. Throughout the session, we will be using Mentimeter to ask your questions, so we invite you to have a device ready, like your phone or laptop, to participate. You can join using the QR code on the screen now, and we also have a link to join in the pinned post in the Q&A box. We'll also have time to answer some of your questions that you submitted in the registration process, as well as some live ones. So please use the Q&A feature if you've got a burning question. If you don't have access to the Q&A for any reason, you can email your question to forums@comcare.gov.au. Finally, we'll address why you should use work design and touch on some practical ways you can get started using it right away. Before we dive into work design, let's make sure we're all clear on why having good work is so important. So you may have seen something like this before, but if you haven't, the evidence is clear that good work is good for us. The design of our work affects the way we feel and can influence our motivation, engagement, and stress levels at work. Good work is safe and healthy, respectful, engaging, fair, meaningful, and secure. Having good work means people have the skills to do their job, they have clarity about their role and deliverables, they have positive work relationships, reasonable work hours and deadlines, the right level of autonomy, they feel supported by their colleagues and managers, and they have the capability and capacity that matches the demands of their job. But not every job requires every element to be present. It's about progress, not perfection. The goal and the responsibility we have as HR practitioners and people leaders is to help our staff members to enjoy good quality work that supports their well-being. This should be a key objective for all leaders, and this means regularly reflecting on whether our everyday actions, conversations and decisions are supporting our people to thrive, or if there's something we can change to better support good work. I'll pass over to Tamara now, who's going to talk about why using work design is valuable.
Thank you, Lynn. Sorry, I almost forgot to take myself off silent. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So let's get started with well-being. So I'm guessing that probably everyone here understands that psychosocial hazards can damage or destroy people's health and well-being. But something that's not always quite as well understood is that positive psychosocial factors can actually grow well-being and protect people from the harmful effects of psychosocial risks. So let's just get everybody involved at this point in time. We're curious to know what well-being means to you. So this is where you all get to share your thoughts and we get to see what that looks like in a word cloud. So we do have the link in the pinned post to the Q&A. So that looks like there's people are getting onto that nice and quickly. So just 1 or 2 words. So it's healthy coming up. Well, hang on, it's gone away again. Here we go. Okay, so healthy, absolutely. Having safety, security, feeling good, exactly. Happiness. It's hard to be happy if we're not feeling good and we don't have those things. Feeling at peace, that's a nice one. Yeah, physical and mental health. So that's great. Safe workplace. Lots of the same ones coming up. Lots that I can't quite read, but that is that's excellent. I'm not sure if everybody's had a chance yet, but we're having the same things come up. So I think we can move forward, actually. I was going to ask you, Lynn, about what well-being means to you. Yeah, and noticing. Did you want to jump in?
Yeah, a lot of the same sort of things that come up. I think wellbeing is one of those things that we actually often take for granted. We don't notice it until it's missing. So, but a lot of those sorts of things, I think about feeling good within myself, having good mental, physical, and emotional health, really.
Yep. So I really like to think of well-being as like a padded coat that we're all wearing, and that it protects us from harm. So when our wellbeing coat is in really good condition, so it's got really nice thick padding, we feel good and we function and we perform really well. So when our wellbeing is high and we're feeling like that, and we get a curveball at work, so it might be an exceptionally busy period, you might have, some crazy deadlines to meet, there might be other stresses going on, it might be, behavior in the workplace that's gotten stressful, whatever it is, we can cope with it, okay? So it might not be fun, we might get tired, but we don't tip over into burnout. Or anything like that. Sorry, I'm using my hands to express myself, and sometimes I touch the keyboard and put myself on mute. So when life really starts to wear down our well-being coat, that's when it gets thin, holes appear, and when we stop feeling good. We start feeling quite fragile often. We tend to feel fatigued. We might feel literally unwell. We might be very emotionally reactive, sleep badly, stop exercising, eat more junk food, reach for an extra glass of wine or 2. So you get the picture. So in this state, we are much more vulnerable to illness and injury, including mental ill health. And those more difficult times at work become really hazardous. So let's move on to the next slide. Thank you. So really, well-being is not just a nice to have. It's actually something that's critically important to build and maintain, and work design offers us a strategy for how to do that. So our team has recently been working with Curtin University to design and deliver work design pilot programs that use the SMART work design model. And we've chosen SMART work design because we know that it's unique in that it goes beyond responding to symptoms of psychosocial risks and actually addresses the root causes. So you can see from this image on the slide here how poor work design is a root cause, not just for people feeling stressed, but also for poor performance and low innovation as well. And when we see symptoms of poor work design, that can look like stress quite often, but it also often quite often looks like poor performance. And we tend to look to solutions that are responding to the symptoms. So things like counselling, or it might be training. And while people often do need more support in those situations, these responses rarely address the root cause. So in that sense, they are more of a band-aid response. Certainly, we know that the evidence is pretty clear that providing training when poor performance is identified is generally ineffective. So we usually try to fix the person, and what we miss is the opportunity to fix the work. So on the slide here are the 5 elements of the SMART work design model. So there are 5 key themes, if you will, to consider when designing or redesigning work that will help to ensure positive outcomes. So in this SMART framework, and apologies that it is another SMART framework, you probably are quite familiar with at least one other SMART framework. In this one, S is for stimulating work. So that's work that really challenges us, that uses our skills, that involves a variety of tasks, and also includes some problem-solving demands. So when we don't have work that is stimulating enough, we tend to feel bored and we can disengage, and this is not good for our well-being. So M is for mastery at work. So when we have this sense of mastery, we really feel like we own our jobs. So we have the skills, we know the work, and we are performing to our potential. And we develop mastery from having role clarity, from getting feedback on our performance, and also from that ability to take a task from beginning to end and see how our work is contributing to something bigger. So A is for agency, and that's all about having a sense of autonomy and control over how our work is scheduled, the methods that we use to achieve outcomes, and our ability to make decisions. R is for relational work. So this one is really essentially about the quality of our work relationships, particularly how much support we have, not just from our managers, but also our colleagues, but also how connected we feel to others at work and to the purpose of our work and the beneficiaries, the people who benefit from our work. So T is for tolerable work demands. So those are obviously ones that we feel are sustainable. So we can meet them without feeling overly stretched or understretched, and also that the demands don't create role conflict for us. So having said that, I do want to acknowledge that work demands are not static. So they go up and down all the time in response to a really big range of factors at work. So one more thing before we leave the SMART framework that I think it's important to grasp is that the T for tolerable demands is really the odd letter out here. So the T represents all the job demands, all the huge numbers of job demands, lots of different types, that can pose a risk to people's health and well-being when they're not balanced by job resources that support well-being. So the S and the M and the A and the R, those elements, they're job resources. So the idea here is to build up those elements of a person's job so that when demands at work increase, the person can meet them without feeling overwhelmed. So I just want to give an example before we move on, because this is a really key concept. So for those of us in the public service know, we have to respond to government, and we sometimes have no control over the level of our work demands. So I'm thinking about senior executive level leaders who have to appear at Senate estimates and be grilled by politicians. So this is obviously a very high pressure situation with challenging cognitive and sometimes emotional demands. So we can't control or prevent their appearance, but their workplace can provide high quality information through briefing documentation and other supports so that they're as prepared as possible when they go into that situation. And if they can also receive quality social support from their colleagues, then that will be protective for them too. So let's pause here and take a few moments to think about how the SMART elements or domains show up in your work. So I'd like you to take just a quick minute to reflect on a time when you have made a change to your work design. So we're going to use Mentimeter again. Please use the link in the Q&A. Yep, they've already got some responses coming in, so that's great. So in particular, I would like you to think about what you changed, why you made the change, and have a shot at identifying one of the elements of SMART that this change related to.
I've got an example that I can share while we're waiting, is a change to one of my staff members' work deliverables and responsibilities that we agreed as part of their regular performance conversation. So this change was prompted by my staff member, who identified that she would like to lead a particular piece of work that we have coming up. We had a conversation about how this draws on her existing skills and strengths, and how having leadership of the work from beginning to end will enhance her sense of mastery. I expect that she'll also feel a higher level of stimulation associated with the increased responsibility, and increased agency, as she'll have a lot of control over the decisions. So as the work will involve working with other teams, it may also enhance her relationships with other staff and help her to feel more connected to them. So as you can see in that example, work redesign is something that we all already do, but using SMART and doing it very intentionally will have a much bigger impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're seeing a bit of some themes here. Flexible work arrangements, working from home, that's a real classic. And I'm sure we can all appreciate, the impact of that and how that has helped us, help support our well-being. I think it does for lots of people. There's lots of other examples that are coming up. I've seen
I like
things
that one
like
of splitting into the subsections, the focus, so that across the team, like a larger team, you can split into subsections to focus on. I think that's a really good one.
Yep. Some people are obviously feeling quite a high sense of agency, and they've got those ability to just make small changes, as they need to. And that's exactly the sort of thing that we are talking about here. We probably shouldn't spend too much time. We probably should keep going, but there's so many, there's a lot here about it. So some people have been suggesting changes that are supporting other people, which is fantastic to see. So how can we use smart work design in practice? So what we've got on this slide are 3 different ways that can all be done either at a team level or at an individual level. So work redesign is the first one here. So that's where leaders and workers really collaborate to make changes to roles, tasks, responsibilities, relationships, or decision making. So it could be any of those sort of things. The second way is activating job crafting. And so that's when really leaders encourage and enable their staff members to nudge and shape their work to better fit their needs. And so, taking advantage of flexible work arrangements, that's a classic way of job crafting to make your job better fit with the rest of your life. And then this third one is the local leader behaviours. So that's where leaders behave in ways that support smart work. So leaders who have really strong people management skills, they are already doing this, consciously or unconsciously. But there is an opportunity to lift leaders' awareness of their own daily behaviours and act more intentionally in line with the SMART elements. So each of these strategies can be initiated by the manager of a team, and we're going to look a little bit more closely at them and also point you towards some resources that might be helpful. So the first way we're going to look at is this work redesign in practice. So how do we use SMART to really address psychosocial risks through work redesign? So there's lots of ways to do work redesign, but we focused on how we can do it in a very simple way and in a way that drives continuous improvement of SMART. So we recently used funding from the APS Capability Reinvestment Fund, and we worked with Curtin University to design, develop and implement a smart work design in teams pilot program. So in our pilot, we tested a 4-step work redesign process, and that's this figure that you can see on the slide. And we did that in 9 different APS agencies. So that was quite recent, and we are in the process of exploring different ways that we can translate learnings and outputs from the pilot into programs and other offerings for the Comcare scheme. So I'll just run through the 4-step process. It begins with diagnose. So we used Curtin University's Smart Work Design Survey, and I believe that there is a link to that that's pinned in the Q&A. So to assess work design for individuals. And then we merged the individual results into a smart team report for each of our pilot teams. So if you wanted to do something similar to this, ideally you would want something like the Curtin survey to give you a really clear picture of what's going on. But having said that, you can diagnose quite a lot just by talking to people about their work, particularly if you're asking questions that are aligned to SMART. So in most cases, people will already have a fair understanding of what is working well and what needs to be strengthened. So the next step in the 4-step process, revise, is where you develop a plan to alter your work design. In the 3rd step, you test the changes, and you might need to iterate your work redesign plan, because with work redesign, it's not a set and forget. It's very much, it's quite common that what you test doesn't necessarily work as you expect to, or it might not work right away. It might need to be adjusted, or it might need to be swapped out for something else altogether. When you do get it right, the last step is to embed the change. So that I'm talking about embedding it within the relevant systems and also the ways of working. So what we really want to do is make sure that it's resilient to any future change. So including staff turnover, restructures, that kind of thing. So, thank you. So on this slide, we've got 2 4-step processes. So one of them is the one I've just been talking about. And the other one is the work health safety risk management cycle that most of you will be, pretty familiar with already. So if we compare the 2 processes, we can see immediately that they are very similar. So they both guide people through a 4-step continuous improvement cycle to prevent and manage psychosocial risks. The terms that we use are different, but they basically do the same thing. So we're talking about identifying and assessing problems, making changes, and testing, reviewing, embedding the change. In both processes, it's critical to actively involve the people performing the work. If you don't do that, there is a very high risk that you won't get it right. So I hope you can clearly see how work redesign is actually a risk management approach in itself. And it's also a bit of a change management process too. So let's move on. And I know it's a lot to take in one webinar, so apologies. We do have quite a bit to cover. The second way is to use job crafting. This is the simplest way to use SMART, and it's also the most accessible. Every one of us can not only do job crafting, but we're all already doing at least a little bit of it without being conscious of it some of the time. So job crafting really happens when you proactively shape your work to better fit your needs. I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes here, and we're going to play this video from Tailored Thinking. It's a UK organisation. It's got some great resources on job crafting, and they've got an excellent video that explains it better than I can. So let's watch it now.
From our choice of coffee, to our clothes, to our cars, we personalise all aspects of our lives. However, one area of our lives we are not often encouraged to personalise is our work. Research has shown that when we personalise something, we value it up to 2 times more than something that comes off the shelf. Job crafting encourages people to proactively personalise their work to make it a better fit for them, much like a semi-tailored suit. So why does job crafting matter? Adopting a tailored approach to work has a multitude of benefits. Job crafting enables people to thrive in their work, boosting feelings of confidence, happiness, and even having a positive impact on physical health. Job crafting also stimulates personal and professional growth and development, and has been linked with career progression and satisfaction. Additionally, job crafting fuels performance by impacting motivation, productivity, and innovation. There are 5 core forms of job crafting. Task crafting involves making changes to the tasks and activities that make up a job, including redesigning, adding, or removing tasks. Purpose crafting involves reflecting on the meaning of our role and how our work aligns with our personal values. Shaping how we connect with our colleagues and amplifying the relationships which matter to us is known as relationship crafting. Wellbeing crafting encourages us to find and create opportunities to boost physical and mental health through how we carry out our work. Skill crafting involves finding opportunities to develop, refine, or consolidate skills and knowledge. So how can we bring job crafting to life? In order to job craft, people need the opportunity and encouragement to make small changes to make their job a better and more personal fit with their strengths, passions, and interests. Research shows us that making these changes benefits not only the individual, but their colleagues, customers, and organisation too. To find out more about how to make work better, please visit our website at tailoredthinking.co.uk.
Not knowing what's going on in my business. That's what keeps me up at night. The fact that we run on Monday.com and that it takes our day.
So the video highlights the value of making small adjustments to what you do at work or how you do your work that can make your work feel more satisfying and rewarding. Before we move on, I want to share 3 quick examples of job crafting in action from someone in the Comcare scheme, Nicole, who works in learning and development at the Australian Public Service Commission and has really embraced job crafting. The first example is of task crafting. Nicole successfully manages a busy workload with a high level of competing priorities and demands. Like many of us, she frequently is given additional or often urgent tasks that can disrupt her plan for the day. One way that Nicole deals with this, in her own words, is I spend time at the end of each day identifying an important task, so one important task to be done the next day. Then I put it first on my to-do list. Then it's the first thing that she does in the morning when she gets into work. So this means that she gets an important task done first, or at least begun, before the day has a chance to change things. So then, even if the rest of the day goes off track, she's still achieved that one thing that she really needed to. Nicole's second example is of relationship crafting. Nicole says, at the APSC, we use a company called Coffee Roulette. When you sign up for it, you get put into a database, and every few weeks, you're paired with someone in the agency to meet for coffee, either in person or virtually. So she's met some really great people and gotten a better insight into the work being done in the agency because of it. The final example of wellbeing crafting is my favourite, probably because I can relate to the problem it addresses. Nicole says, one of the best things I did for myself was rather than only have a half hour for lunch and finish my workday earlier as I used to, I extended my workday to take a full hour for lunch and started having lunch away from my desk. The impact on my psychological health was immediate. So I hope this gives you a good idea of what job crafting can look like. And I guess my number one takeaway for job crafting is never forget that a small change can make a really big difference.
Great. So let's move on now to the third way to strengthen SMART. So that's that leading for SMART. So it's really recognising and promoting the local leader behaviours that shape our work design. So I do sometimes get asked for advice on how to manage psychosocial risks. And my number one tip by a country mile is to invest in your leaders, by which I mean any person who supervises or manages others. And that's because we know that how managers and supervisors behave at work has the biggest impact. So make sure that all of these people do have the people management skills to effectively support their staff. And, I also would say you don't need to wait for the end of a psychosocial risk management process or hazard identification to be able to do this stuff. This is evidence-based on what works. So organisations who are really committed to improving psychosocial outcomes can do this straight away. But we do have some resources of our own that can also help. So our Good Work Design resources on our website address 10 topics that you can see on the slide, and those ones are really critical for optimal outcomes. But we also know that they can be quite challenging to get right. So there are 10 2 to 3 minute videos on the theme of what great managers do, as well as some better practice guidance, a suite of microlearns, and also some team talks that help teams to start talking about good work design. So the topics address known risks to health and wellbeing, participation and productivity, and they are particularly useful for preventing and managing psychosocial risks. But I also like to say at this point, compliance with the work health and safety legislation is not a focus of the resources. Our focus here is on what works. It's on better practice for more effective prevention. But having said that, when prevention is effective, that does indicate that a PCBU is meeting their primary duty under the work health safety legislation. Okay, so just before we move on, I do want to just highlight the team talks that we've got, because these are part of our suite of resources, but I feel like they can probably be quite easily overlooked. Along with the videos, I think they're the most useful because they help teams to discuss their work design. So for example, during a team meeting. And this is absolutely critical because we know that having conversations, talking about the issues with the people who are experiencing it is the key to improving work design and also for minimising psychosocial risks. So these team talks were trialled internally at Comcare, and we found them to be effective in starting useful conversations. We have since rolled out the team talks to all Comcare teams as part of our census action plan. And it could also form part of an organisation's response to a psychosocial survey. Because while a survey can tell you what your overall risk profile looks like, what it generally doesn't do is give you that more local view of what is really going on at a, operational, more of a micro level. And you do need to have conversations to unpack this. So before we're going to do the Q&A a bit early today, and then we're going to have a little bit more content afterwards. So just flagging that now, so don't run away because you think it's over. But before we get to the Q&A, I do want to give 3 reasons to use smart work design, just to sort of sum up what I think the key messages here are. So number 1, smart work design, it draws on decades of research evidence on what works to prevent and manage psychosocial risks. It goes straight to the source that is driving the risks, addresses root causes that underlie and, produce those psychosocial hazards and increase them. Number 2, unlike traditional risk management approaches, smart work design doesn't pick off hazards one by one. So it offers a more holistic approach that tackles multiple challenges in workplaces, including boosting innovation and performance. So this makes it a much better investment for your time and effort. Number 3, we can empower people at all levels to proactively make their work better. So as Georgie Harmon said a few weeks ago, if you caught her webinar, the Safe Work one we did, if you want people to do a good job, give them good work to do. And I'd even go further and say, and step out of the way and let them get on with it.
Thank you, Tamara. I love that quote from Georgie. You've covered a lot of ground already and provided plenty of food for thought. I think now is a good time to pause and take some questions from the audience. Let's kick off with a question that was submitted in the registration. The question says, I'm interested in hearing more about how work can be designed to support psychological risk management and to support access and inclusion. For example, considerations of disability, health issues, and diversity in language and culture.
Thank you to the person who put that one in. I really like that question. I think there's, in some ways, I'm hoping that we've already covered enough in the webinar regarding psychosocial risk management that you've got a fair idea of that. But I do think that work design, creating good work, has great potential to strengthen accessibility and inclusion and better support diversity, which is something that we're constantly challenged by. And this is something that we are interested in showcasing in future products, because, we're not singling people out with a particular diversity lens and saying, well, how can we support them? It's more of a universal approach that recognises that every one of us is different from the next person, and our needs and our interests and our motivations and our strengths and our skills, all going to look different. But I would like to go a step further and provide some extra information on a number of different diversity areas, such as neurodiversity, for example, to strengthen people's understanding of what else could be useful for particular groups of people. But if we can start thinking about meeting people where we're at and, doing what we can to support them, then, that's off to a flying start, I think. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks. So how can leaders be supported to identify and act on poor work design factors contributing to psychosocial risks, rather than seeing them as individual performance issues?
Yeah, that's another great question. There's obviously a really big education piece here for managers and supervisors and everyone really. Probably, I think people don't understand what's contributing to what looks like performance issues, and it can be poor performance. I'm not saying it's not, but very often it's not all about what's going on for that individual. It's a combination. It might be a combination, but it's also about where their work is creating challenges for them, that's making it harder for them to support, to perform, and where more supports and things can be changed to better support that. I think if we can normalise conversations about work design and SMART as part of our everyday conversations, then that's a language that we can use in performance contexts, so that we take that spotlight off the person and what they're failing to do, and make it more about where the work is suboptimal and what we can do about that.
Okay, we've got a few questions coming through the chat. So how does the SMART model align with a trauma-informed psychosocial risk management process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would just say, to start with, I'm not a huge expert when it comes to trauma-informed, but I have recently attended a bit of training. I think it aligns really well. It's partly again that thing of taking the spotlight off the individual and seeing things as problematic for an individual, and making it more about what their environment and what's going on and what can be changed or strengthened in that environment. I think also it aligns nicely because what I just mentioned before, it's about meeting people where they're at and tailoring things to individuals. I'd have to think a bit more before exploring that one in more detail, but I think that's a good place to start for trauma, to be more sensitive to people's needs.
Might have to take that as a question on notice tomorrow. The next one's about job crafting, and saying that it reads that the job crafting or job redesign aligns really well in an office or uni or corporate setup. Can you please explain how you would make it work out in a manufacturing setup?
Yeah, great question. And I totally get where you're coming from with that. I started my work health safety journey in food processing. It's looking back on my experience working in food processing, there wasn't a lot of involvement of the workers when it came to setting up processes and equipment, and because we're just expected to come to the party and deal with what's there. I think where the opportunity lies, it's in those supports. So it's looking at where there are opportunities to give people a little bit more decision making or a little bit more autonomy, give them a little bit more choice, because when you take all of that sort of choice and autonomy away, that's a very difficult place for people, and it can be very harmful. I think you can look at how you can, strengthen that sense of teamwork, strengthen relationships, strengthen people's connections, and then that's hugely, that workplace support is hugely protective, and it's something that we can almost always improve on. Obviously, you've got things like job rotation to increase, task variety. I wouldn't be putting somebody in a particular role that is, potentially going to damage them, and just because they can do it and they're doing it okay, leave them there for too long. I've seen that happen, and I've seen people be broken by doing that. So I could talk for more, but maybe let's move on to another question.
Well, there's a bit of a follow-up comment there around other settings like field work or outdoor environments.
Yep. So, a great follow-up question. I think it's really important that we acknowledge that there's going to be a lot that's outside of our locus of control, or circle, or locus of control or influence. So we do need to keep the focus, I would say, not just within what we can control, but also that's going a little bit more broadly to what we might be able to influence, and that might be influencing another workplace that we go into and letting them know about what we need or what's working or not working. So it's about, dealing with the hand that we've been dealt, and we often can't change certain things that are clearly problematic. Work demands is a great example of that. We often really just can't design them away or really do much that's going to reduce them. But if we focus on those other SMAR elements, we can help people cope with them. And when people can cope, that means that the risk is really, really reduced, right? Because they're not feeling so strung out, and their well-being is, they're able to meet it. So literally, I would say the risk relating to work demand goes down if those other elements go up. So we have to start trying to think about that, and not just keep banging our heads against the brick wall of how do we bring the demands down, because we can't always.
Okay, another question around any advice on how to engage in work design with casual team members who may only work once a week. So how can we still engage with them meaningfully despite limited time and resources?
Yeah, I think you can still have a conversation, about, there's nothing stopping you from introducing the SMART framework and saying, have an initial conversation about what that is about, and saying this is the way, I will, want to check in with you and see how you're going. This is the concept that we find useful here, and this is the language that we're going to use. And then just as you would for any other staff member, touching base with them, checking in, making sure people are okay, and that you're going to pick up when there's an issue. Because, obviously if you've only got somebody coming in once a week, it is harder to create that relationship where you can identify early warning signs. So you probably need to be more intentional. But you do the same things, you just be a little bit more intentional. You set it up. Yeah, I'm going to touch base with you, this often, that kind of thing.
Thanks. So the next one's probably a really good one to chat more about the pilot program that we did in Smart Work Design in Teams. The question is, how do you ensure that participants in a work redesign process don't become disengaged if their ideas aren't compatible with the role of the team?
Yeah, that's another excellent question. Thank you. I think that sometimes in teams, and we did see this in the pilot, is people will have different needs, and they will sometimes perceive that the areas that need to be strengthened are different areas, you know, from other members in the team. So some people, for example, might be very happy just living in there, you know, doing their work, getting on with it, doing their thing. Other people may feel that relationships and that relational support and connection across the team is not optimal, and they may need more of that. And so this is where, people's different personalities, their characteristics, their life experience, it's all very variable. So people will sometimes want different things. It's obviously more going to take some skills maybe to have conversations and approach it in a way where everybody's issues or the things that they think are really important are acknowledged and people feel that they're acknowledged. Creating psychologically safe spaces for conversation so that people feel that they can be honest is important as well. And it doesn't mean that you've just got to do one thing at a time. So, that's the other thing. Or maybe you say, how about we work on this for these reasons right now, but then we turn our attention to this. If it's in terms of different ideas about what's going to work, it's work design and redesign is quite experimental. So, you might have one issue, but you might want to try 3 different strategies, and to see what's going to work. So you don't have to just go with, one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the things we did in the pilot. We actually tried to do 2 quick wins and one sort of bigger, more complex, longer change as well, so that people could see, those baby steps and get some initial runs on the board, because some of those things that require a bit more discussion and a bit more negotiation or nuance, they might take quite a bit longer. Great.
That's a great point, Lynn, and that reminds me of something that I've heard from our colleagues at Curtin University say, is that sometimes the big bets, you think they're going to make the biggest difference, but actually a quick win can often be more effective than a big bet. So just because something looks quick and easy doesn't mean that it's not actually the number one thing to do. Yeah.
Here's another one, a little bit around where a team works in a particularly distressing work environment, so redress or invalidity or death benefits. How can we build resilience in our workforce, noting the subject matter is not able to be changed and it's a big psychosocial hazard?
Yep. So this is coming up a lot, I would say. I think Comcare is hearing quite a bit from workplaces on teams that do have this type of challenge. This is where, and this goes back to what I was saying earlier, sometimes you cannot, change the work demand. I do think, I'm not, to be honest, personally, I'm not a massive fan of the hierarchy of control, but I do think you do want to think a little bit outside the square about what could be eliminated, and sometimes there's an opportunity. But if you can't do that, if there's really nothing else, then it is about strengthening those SMART elements. It's helping people to have the best possible work to do and to feel as supported as possible. So we know that high-performing teams are ones where everybody feels like everybody else in their team has got their back. And, when they do fall down, people are there. People are there right away, and people understand what they're going through. It's those sorts of things. So you've got to put the attention into, making sure people, have that sense of mastery. They have as much agency as you can give them, and they have that relational part in particular.
So I've got a question around work redesign initiatives can themselves introduce uncertainty and potentially cause anxiety amongst workers. How can this be effectively managed throughout the redesign process? And additionally, if the existing work culture is poor, how can work redesign be leveraged to address and improve these underlying cultural issues?
Yeah, a couple of really good questions. Absolutely true. Any change is a hazard. It's in the code. We know that any change can, can cause harm. We talk a lot. I know we had a webinar a week or two ago on consultation, and we talk a lot about why that is important. So, I would say the brilliant thing about more bottom-up approaches to work design that is making sure that the workers participate in it. I think every time you've got any sort of change, and that could be a top-down work design or redesign, if people are not, if they haven't bought into it, then it's potentially harmful. So, and you are missing, I think the other thing that we have seen, we did a conference workshop at the Comcare conference last year, and with an activity for workshop participants around work design. And what we found from that is that the further away from from the worker who is exposed to a particular hazard, the further away somebody is, the less likely they are to be able to come up with a work design change that is relevant and applicable. So you really literally can't do this without the people who perform the work. And that's, so I would say get them participating in it is the way. And and we also know that, best practice change management that also relies on that participation, because people feel that they have a stake in it, but they also feel like they're being heard, and they've got a level of control there if they're able to, put their perspective forward and feel heard, and potentially change what's happening. Then that's the ideal. So
yeah,
I think that that absolutely minimises that anxiety. That's when people don't have control and they perceive it as something that's being done to them.
Yeah. All right, we've got 2 questions I'm going to try and sneak in. So nice, succinct responses. How do you think SMART aligns with return to work and minimising the psychosocial risk of further injury?
Brilliant question. This is something I think about a lot because we've done quite a bit in terms of supporting work participation. People who have had a workplace injury or illness, they need to go back to good work. So it is more critical for them than it is for the rest of us, because they're already damaged, right? They already have had harm. So looking at what was it in the workplace that contributed to that harm from that work design perspective. What was it? Was it relational? Was it lack of support? Did they not have enough role clarity? There's a whole range of factors that will contribute to any injury or illness, particularly the psychosocial ones. And you want to identify what's contributing, and you want to fix those things before you send them back, ideally, or while they're coming back. Yeah.
Yeah. And the last question, how can a low-level employee use any of this information if attempts to escalate problems are ignored or rebuffed?
Yeah. Again, that goes back to considering what is within my circle of control and where's my circle of influence also. And, that sounds like somebody has maybe attempted to push into that circle of influence and influence up, and it sadly, it's not always supported. So this is why we're doing the webinars like this, is to try to get it across about how important it is to empower workers, because it is really important. And it depends on the situation you're in. If you're in a really situation with very poor work design and repeated attempts are getting ignored, I would say move on, honestly.
Yeah, thanks, Tamara. And thank you, everyone, for all your questions today. And sorry if we didn't get time to answer yours, but don't log off yet. We're keen to know what work design topics you'd like to address in a future webinar. There should be one more question for you in the Mentimeter, so please use the Mentimeter link in the Q&A to tell us what you want. We want to spend a few minutes talking about what we can all do, if we choose to start using smart work design in our jobs. So the quickest way to do this is to start having conversations with people about their work design. At its simplest, we can all ask people questions like, what is working well? What isn't working so well? And what does this look like? And what opportunities are there for you to improve work? So many of us already ask these questions and have work redesign conversations, although we may not think of it as work redesign. A way to really lift the quality of the conversations and make it more meaningful is to make sure that everyone involved is familiar with the smart work design model. So this enables us to have a shared language based on SMART and more easily articulate some of those work design issues. So to help you introduce smart work design to your colleagues, manager or team members and set the scene for these conversations, we've got a new tool, Team Talk, that helps explain smart work design and guides a conversation on when, where and how you'd like to talk together about your work design. It also includes a list of possible questions on stimulating work, mastery at work, agency at work, relational work and work demands to help you get started or dig deeper when you're having conversations about SMART. You can find this Team Talk in the pinned Q&A on our website as well.
So before we finish up, my 3 top tips for having smart conversations. The first one is to be curious. So curious about what is going on for the individual. So you want to ask open questions. It's really critical to avoid assumptions as far as possible. When it's difficult to get a clear picture, try and test your understanding with the person by asking more questions. The second one is really what I've mentioned a couple of times already. It's meeting people where they're at. So you may have someone who's really excited about smart work design and they've got ideas that they want to try. That's great. I would say make the most of that energy. Give them the agency to run with their ideas within appropriate guide rails. And that might look like reminding them that they need to consider the potential impacts of any proposed changes, including on others in the team, and making sure that you keep regularly checking in together. In other cases, it means going more slowly. So you might need to provide an authorizing environment that helps people to feel, to really build their confidence and reflect on their own preferences. So for all these conversations, it's critical that they're not one-offs and that we continue to build trust by doing what we say we're going to do and also by keeping on talking about SMART. So on that note, who are you going to talk to about smart work design and what are you going to say?
Thank you everyone for spending this time with us today. We really appreciate all the great questions earlier. Prevention of psychosocial risks is a significant challenge, but there are some quick and easy actions that can help you and your organisation to move in the right direction. So all of these resources are in the pinned comments in the Q&A, and you will also receive an email with them and a copy of the slides from the presentation today. So make sure to promote the use of Comcare's Good Work Design resources to frontline managers and teams, and keep an eye on our website for upcoming resources as well. For those of you in the Australian Public Service, there are some high quality leadership programs available to build the relational and leadership skills that we know are really critically important for effective prevention and management of psychosocial risks. You can currently put EL2s and high-performing EL1s through the APS Academy's Leadership Edge program, which includes a Good Work Design Sprint. The Academy also offers a relational leadership skills lab for SES and EL2s. So they're also currently piloting a Management Edge program for APS 6s and EL1 people managers that will also incorporate Good Work Design. So that should be becoming available next year. And most importantly, as Tamara said, start talking about smart work design in your workplace with your manager, your reports and your colleagues. And just before you all go, I will share some upcoming activities that may be of interest to you. So first of all, the Comcare National Conference is Comcare's flagship event, which happens every 2 years. We have exciting news to share with you that the next conference is confirmed for the 14th to the 16th September 2026 in Canberra. So the conference will explore a people-first approach to workplace health and safety, and more details on this will be available later in the year. We're also excited to announce we have an upcoming training session on psychosocial risk management in November, and a new training package that rolls out next month on understanding and addressing trauma in the workplace. A short survey will be landing in your inbox shortly. You can also scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the pinned Q&A post to complete it now. It only takes a few minutes and it really helps us shape future sessions. And if you'd like to revisit today's session or share it with colleagues who couldn't make it, the recording will be available soon on the Comcare website. Thank you very much again for joining us today. Take care, stay safe, and we hope to see you at the next event. Thank you.